I married Kevin because he was safe, steady, the kind of man who planned his lunches a week in advance and left for work at exactly 7:23 every morning, coffee mug in hand, briefcase perfectly organized, 8 years of the same routine. And honestly, there was something comforting about that predictability. While my friends were dealing with cheating boyfriends and flaky husbands who forgot anniversaries, I had Kevin, who color-coded our shared calendar and never missed a bill payment. Our house was beautiful, a colonial with actual white picket fencing that Kevin maintained like it was his personal mission from above. I had my own car, a decent job at the marketing firm, and enough financial security to buy whatever caught my eye without checking our account balance first. Sure, Kevin wasn't exactly the most exciting conversationalist, and yes, his idea of spontaneity was trying a new brand of pasta sauce. But I had a good life, a comfortable life. The thing about comfort, though, is how easily you start taking it for granted. Derek Martinez joined our graphic design department on a Tuesday in March, and within a week, he had everyone laughing at his impressions of our uptight department head. He was one of those naturally funny people who could make even the most mundane office drama sound like comedy gold. Dark hair, easy smile, and this sarcastic wit that made even boring client meetings bearable. While Kevin spent his evenings reorganizing his tool shed for the third time that month, Derek was the guy who actually had interesting stories to tell. When our departments got assigned a joint project for the Henderson account, Derek volunteered to be the graphic design liaison. Smart move. Really, since most of his colleagues treated collaboration like root canal surgery. We spent 2 weeks exchanging emails about layouts and color schemes, and I found myself actually looking forward to his messages. He had this way of making even professional correspondence entertaining, slipping in little jokes about our client's obsession with synergistic brand optimization and other corporate nonsense. The project deadline was creeping up fast, and we still needed to finalize the visual elements for the presentation. Derek suggested we work together outside the office to avoid constant interruptions from our respective department heads. Made perfect sense. We could actually focus without Janet from accounting stopping by every 20 minutes to complain about someone microwaving fish in the break room. That Thursday morning, Kevin followed his usual routine to the minute. Up at 6, shower, coffee, scan through his perfectly organized work papers while eating exactly 2 pieces of wheat toast. He kissed my forehead at 7:20, grabbed his briefcase, and headed out to his car, probably already mentally reviewing his schedule for the day. The man hadn't deviated from this pattern once in our entire marriage. I could set my watch by Kevin's habits. Derek arrived around 10 with his laptop and a folder full of design mock-ups. We spread everything out on the dining room table, and for the first hour, we actually managed to stay focused on work. The Henderson project was coming together nicely. Derek had this talent for taking my marketing concepts and turning them into visuals that actually made sense. We were discussing font choices when he suggested we take a break and grab some coffee. You know what? I said, heading to the kitchen. I think we have some wine left from last weekend. Want to try that instead? Derek raised an eyebrow. It's not even noon yet. So, we're working from home. We're making good progress. And it's not like we have to drive anywhere. I was already pulling the bottle from the counter. A nice Pinot Grigio that Kevin had picked up for some dinner party we'd hosted. Besides, maybe it'll make the Henderson account seem less tedious. He laughed and shrugged. Can't argue with that logic. 1 glass turned into 2 while we debated color palettes. Derek told me about his weekend disaster date. Apparently the woman had spent an entire dinner explaining why she only dated men with specific astrological signs, and I found myself actually laughing until my sides hurt. When was the last time Kevin had made me laugh like that? I couldn't even remember. Your husband's a lucky guy, Derek said, refilling our glasses. You're a lot more fun than most of the people in this office. Kevin's great, I replied automatically, though the wine was making me feel generous toward everyone. He's just steady, reliable. Sometimes I think he'd schedule spontaneity if he could figure out how to put it on a calendar. Derek nearly choked on his wine. Seriously? He schedules everything. You have no idea. The man plans his lunch menu every Sunday night. Color codes it by nutritional content? I gestured vaguely toward the kitchen, where Kevin's weekly meal plan was probably still magneted to the refrigerator in his neat handwriting. I love him, but living with Kevin is like being married to a very sweet, very predictable robot. That sounds... Derek paused, clearly trying to find a diplomatic way to respond. Boring? I supplied, because it is 8 years of the same routine. The same conversations, the same everything. Don't get me wrong. There's something to be said for stability, but sometimes I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my own life. The conversation shifted from work to relationships to life in general. Derek had been divorced for 2 years, and he talked about how liberating it felt to make decisions without consulting a shared calendar or worrying about disrupting someone else's carefully planned schedule. I found myself envying that freedom, that ability to be spontaneous without having to explain why you wanted to try a new restaurant or stay out past 9 on a weeknight. By the time we opened the second bottle, our work materials were forgotten on the dining room table. Derek was sitting closer now, and I was acutely aware of how different he felt from Kevin. Where my husband was cautious and measured, Derek was impulsive and engaging. Where Kevin planned every conversation topic in advance, Derek just said whatever came to mind, and somehow it was always exactly what I wanted to hear. "You know what your problem is?" Derek said, his voice lower now, more intimate. "You're too good, too responsible. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it fit into some master plan?" I couldn't answer that question, which probably said everything. When Derek leaned in to kiss me, I didn't pull away. I should have, obviously, but the wine and the attention and the feeling of being interesting to someone had gone straight to my head. Kevin was at work, following his predictable schedule, probably eating his pre-planned lunch at his desk while reviewing his afternoon appointments. He wouldn't be home until 4 Same as always. What harm could there be in feeling alive for one afternoon? Derek's hands were different from Kevin's, less careful, more urgent. When he suggested we move to somewhere more comfortable, I led him upstairs without hesitation. This wasn't calculated or premeditated. It was just something that was happening. Something that felt inevitable after months of polite marriage and scheduled intimacy and conversations about mortgage rates and grocery lists. The bedroom felt different with Derek in it, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. Kevin's perfectly organized dresser, his books arranged by author's last name, his side of the closet where every shirt hung exactly 2 inches apart. All of it suddenly seemed suffocating instead of comforting. Derek made me feel reckless and desirable and spontaneous, all the things I hadn't realized I'd been missing. For one afternoon, I wasn't Kevin's responsible wife who remembered to pay the electric bill and schedule the annual furnace maintenance. I was just myself, making a choice based on what I wanted instead of what made sense, which is exactly when Kevin decided to break 8 years of routine and come home for lunch. I heard his car in the driveway and felt my stomach drop straight through the floor. Kevin never came home during the day. Never in our entire marriage. He'd eaten lunch at his desk or in the office break room, sticking to his predetermined schedule with religious devotion. Of all the days for him to suddenly develop spontaneous tendencies, it had to be today. "Someone's here," I whispered to Derek, scrambling for my clothes. "I thought you said he never comes home for lunch," Derek hissed back, pulling on his shirt. He never does this." But I could hear Kevin's key in the front door, his footsteps in the hallway. There was no time to get downstairs. No way to pretend we'd been working on the project this whole time. The wine glasses were still on the coffee table, our work materials abandoned, and Derek's car was parked right in the driveway where anyone could see it. Kevin appeared in the bedroom doorway just as Derek was zipping up his pants. For a moment, nobody moved. Kevin just stood there, his lunch bag still in his hand, staring at us with this expression of complete bewilderment. His face went through several different colors before settling on a pale, shocked white. "It's not what it looks like," I said immediately, which was possibly the stupidest thing I could have said since it was exactly what it looked like. "Kevin, I can explain. We were working on the project, and we had some wine, and it was an accident." An accident. Like I'd tripped and fallen into bed with my coworker. Kevin's eyes filled up with tears, but he didn't say anything. No yelling, no cursing, no dramatic confrontation like you see in movies. He just looked at me with these wounded, red-rimmed eyes like I'd physically hurt him, which I guess I had. Derek mumbled something about leaving and pushed past Kevin in the doorway. I heard him grabbing his stuff from downstairs, the front door slamming, his car starting up. Kevin and I were left alone in our bedroom, staring at each other across 8 years of marriage that I'd just blown up in one afternoon. "Kevin, please, let me explain." I started, but he was already turning away. "Pack my things," he said quietly. "I'll be staying at Mike's." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt enormous and empty. I called him 23 times that first evening. 23 calls that went straight to voicemail. I texted until my fingers cramped. Sent long, rambling messages about how sorry I was, how it didn't mean anything, how we could work through this if he'd just talk to me. Every message went unread. This was Kevin being dramatic, I told myself. He needed time to cool off, and then we'd sit down like adults and figure this out. People recovered from affairs all the time. It was one afternoon, one stupid mistake that got out of hand because of too much wine and bad timing. We'd been married for 8 years. Surely that counted for something. But Kevin didn't come home that night, or the next morning. Instead, I got an email at 6 a.m., cold, formal, like something he'd send to a client. Simone, I want a divorce. Please have my personal belongings packed and ready for pickup this weekend. I'll have Mike collect them. Don't contact me again. That was it. No discussion. No attempt at counseling. No acknowledgement of our entire history together. Just a business-like dissolution delivered via email, like I was a vendor. He was canceling. I tried calling again, but my number had been blocked. Social media, email, everything. When I tried reaching out through his sister Lisa, who I'd considered one of my closest friends, she told me she never wanted to speak to me again and hung up on me. Kevin's entire family had apparently decided I was persona non grata, like I'd committed some unforgivable sin instead of making one mistake. The divorce papers arrived exactly 1 week after Kevin found us together. 1 week. He'd managed to contact a lawyer, file paperwork, and have me serve faster than most people could plan a dinner party. So much for his supposed commitment to our marriage. I tried everything to reach him, called his office until his secretary started recognizing my voice and hanging up immediately. Drove by his friend Mike's house until Mike came out and threatened to call the police if I didn't stop harassing them. Even showed up at his favorite lunch spot, hoping to catch him during his predictable routine. But apparently Kevin had changed even that habit to avoid me. The man who'd spent 8 years following the exact same schedule had suddenly become completely unpredictable. And it was driving me crazy. When we finally ended up in the same room for the divorce proceedings, I barely recognized him. Kevin sat across from me in the courthouse looking like a polite stranger. Professional. Distant. Completely shut down. He answered the lawyer's questions in monosyllables and avoided making eye contact with me entirely. Kevin, please, I whispered during a break in the proceedings. Can't we just talk about this? 8 years has to mean something. He looked at me then, but it was like looking at a coworker he barely knew. I have nothing to say to you, Simone. That was the last conversation we ever had. Kevin didn't fight me for anything in the divorce. He took his personal belongings, his books, some furniture that had sentimental value, and walked away from everything else. The house, the shared bank accounts, the life we'd built together. He left it all behind like it meant nothing to him, which would have been great, except I couldn't afford the mortgage on my salary alone. Kevin had been the primary breadwinner. I'd gotten comfortable with our dual income and never worried about budgeting for a single-person household. The house payments, insurance, utilities, maintenance, it all added up to more than I could handle. I tried everything to make it work. Picked up freelance projects, looked into refinancing, even considered taking in a roommate. But 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I had to face reality. I was going to lose the house. Watching the foreclosure notice get posted felt like the final insult. I'd lost my husband, his family, our social circle. And now the beautiful colonial, with its white picket fence, was going to some other couple who'd probably appreciate it more than I had. I spent the last week packing up 8 years of memories, selling furniture and electronics and jewelry just to cover moving expenses. My friend Jenna offered to let me stay with her temporarily, which seemed like a lifeline until I realized what temporarily actually meant. Jenna was a single mom with 2 kids, Tyler, who was 8 and seemed to have unlimited energy for asking questions, and Maya, who was 6 and treated me like a live-in babysitter. The apartment was cramped, loud, and chaotic. Everything my life with Kevin hadn't been, "Can you pick up Tyler from soccer practice?" became Jenna's daily refrain. "Can you help Maya with her homework? Can you watch the kids while I run errands?" I'd gone from having my own space and independence to being unpaid household help, sleeping on a pull-out couch and sharing a bathroom with 2 children who apparently believed privacy was optional. The worst part was how grateful I was supposed to be. Jenna was doing me a favor, letting me stay there while I got back on my feet. And everyone expected me to be thankful instead of resentful about my circumstances. But I couldn't help comparing this cramped, noisy apartment to the spacious house I'd shared with Kevin, the quiet evenings and organized routines that I'd taken completely for granted. Dr. Monica, my therapist, had this annoyingly calm voice that she used during our virtual sessions. "Tell me about your daily routine now. Simone, how are you adjusting to the changes in your living situation?" "It's fine." I'd lie, while Tyler practiced his trumpet in the background, and Maya had a meltdown about her missing stuffed animal. I'm managing, but I wasn't managing. I was drowning in consequences that felt completely disproportionate to what I'd actually done. One afternoon of poor judgment had somehow snowballed into losing everything. My marriage, my home, my financial security, my social connections. People were treating me like I'd committed some heinous crime instead of making one mistake that got out of hand. The rational part of my brain understood that Kevin had been hurt by what he'd seen. But the larger part of me couldn't comprehend why he'd thrown away 8 years of marriage without even trying to work through it. Couples survived affairs all the time, with counseling and effort and commitment. People moved past infidelity and rebuilt their relationships stronger than before. But Kevin hadn't given us that chance. He'd made a unilateral decision to end everything based on one moment. One stupid afternoon when I'd had too much wine and made a mistake I couldn't take back. He'd refused to listen to explanations or apologies, cut off all contact, and move forward like our entire history together meant nothing. And now I was living on someone else's couch, helping with homework and carpools, watching my former life disappear piece by piece while Kevin probably continued his perfectly organized routine in some new apartment with his color-coded calendar and predetermined lunch schedule. The injustice of it ate at me during those long nights on Jenna's pull-out couch. I'd lost everything while Derek had simply moved on with his life like nothing had happened. Kevin had walked away, clean, while I was dealing with foreclosure and displacement and the judgment of everyone who knew our story. Even his family had made me the villain, like I'd destroyed their precious Kevin's life instead of making one mistake in an otherwise solid marriage. Doctor. Monica kept pushing me to talk about accountability and choices. But what was the point? The damage was done. The consequences were playing out. And no amount of self-reflection was going to change the fact that Kevin had overreacted to something that could have been worked through if he'd been willing to try. One moment. I told her during our session last week. One stupid moment. And my entire life fell apart. How is that fair? What do you think fairness looks like in this situation? Simone. But I couldn't answer that question, just like I couldn't answer most of her questions. All I knew was that I'd gone from comfortable and secure to displaced and dependent. And the punishment didn't fit the crime. Tyler was practicing his trumpet again. The same 3 notes over and over while Maya demanded help finding her favorite crayon. Jenna was working late, which meant I was on kid duty until bedtime, making dinner from whatever ingredients I could find in her understocked kitchen. This wasn't supposed to be my life. I was supposed to be in my beautiful house with my steady husband, dealing with ordinary problems like what to watch on Netflix or whether we needed to fertilize the lawn. Instead, I was mediating disputes between 2 children who weren't mine, sleeping on a couch that hurt my back, and trying to figure out how to rebuild from nothing. The wine that afternoon with Derek had tasted like freedom and possibility. Now it felt like the most expensive drink I'd ever had, considering what it had ultimately cost me. But even knowing how everything turned out, I couldn't quite bring myself to regret those few hours when I'd felt like myself again, instead of just Kevin's perfectly organized wife. Maybe that made me a terrible person. Maybe I was supposed to feel more guilty about the affair and less resentful about the consequences. But sitting in Jenna's cramped living room, listening to children argue about television shows, while I tried to figure out how to afford my own place again. All I could think about was how different everything might have been if Kevin had just stuck to his routine that day. If he'd eaten his predetermined lunch at his desk, like he had for 8 years running, none of this would have happened. We'd still be married. I'd still be in my house. And that one afternoon would have remained what it was supposed to be, a brief escape that nobody ever had to know about. Instead, Kevin had chosen the worst possible day to be spontaneous, and now I was the one paying the price for his unprecedented break from routine.